Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. I'm joined today by someone really special, Miss Smita Mishra, who's written a very interesting book. And I'm going to show you all. It's the story of Lt Col Purohit, the man betrayed. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining me. I think this was, it was a very, if I may just take a moment to put across my experience of reading this book, very easy read, very engaging. It's not a heavy book that you will kind of figure out what to do, what is this, what is that. It's for everyone. So I'd really recommend people reading this book. It tells you a story of something that happened to one of our soldiers, who's still here, by the way, who suffered through for a certain narrative that was created about him, against him, and against the country. Ma'am, good evening. Thank you so much for joining me. And, firstly, congratulations for this lovely book.
Thank you very much, Adi, for your kind words. I'm happy you found the time to read the book, and more than that, you found it an interesting read. Uh, for a moment, if we forget all the issues attached to the book, first and foremost, it is a story,
Mm.
and one must read it like a story. And if one finds it to be an engaging one, I would consider my work done. Unfortunately, it's not a story out of the imagination of a story writer. It's something that happened in flesh and blood to a very eminent citizen of the country. It involved not just one citizen, his entire family, his friends, his loved ones, people attached to him. So that is where the plot changes. I'm happy you liked it as a story, but unfortunately, it's not a story that you read in fiction. It's very, very real.
I mean, it's not a story that I would want to have happening again. Let me just put that across very clearly. Um, And the first question, first and foremost, Colonel Purohit is not someone that people like to be around, if I may. It's not. He's kept been a very sidelined character. How did you come about this particular idea? What inspired you to write this book, and what was like meeting him for the first time?
Yeah, so it's not that I suddenly hit upon an idea. It was not like a bulb going on in my brain suddenly one morning. No. Uh, by training, by background, I'm a hardcore news reporter. For years, actually decades, my job has been to cover what is going on in the national capital, in other parts of the country. I started my work in Jammu Kashmir. The reporting in Jammu Kashmir was of a very different kind compared to the NCR or Delhi area, or say states places like Lucknow or Patna or Bhopal. So I've seen that, and then I had seen the politics and everything that goes with it, including the highest judiciary, the Supreme Court, etc. And so I was quite thick with everything important that was going on in the country on a daily basis as part of my daily assignments, my duties. And in that came the time when suddenly, out of the blue, uh, not like something brewing up among the people, say the trouble in the northeast, or the as we say, the left wing terror, the LWA extremism, or even the jihadi terrorism that has been spreading its tentacles. Out of the blue, suddenly one morning we realized that, oh, there is something called Hindu terror in the country, and back to back incidents are happening all over the country. And there is this one set of people who are so powerful and so resourceful and so dangerous that they have decided to, match up to all the worst forms of terror in the world by pushing Hindu terror. And the face of that Hindu terror was made. Who was made the face of that Hindu terror? A person known for his patriotism, a decorated serving army officer, highly respected, highly valued, and regarded in his circle of people. There was no politics in his life. He was just doing his duty as a dedicated army officer of the intelligence wing. And suddenly he was this man. who was, plotting to cause, cause the terror and blasts and destroy the country. So, you see, as a news reporter, our job was just to report whatever is going on, and source the information from wherever we could, and put it out there for the people. But somewhere, a reporter, he or she is an intelligent person. We like to analyze what we are writing, or showing on television, and it just didn't add up, the way everything happened. It included incidents where we were told there was concrete evidence of Pakistan pushing some homegrown terrorists from India, and people from Pakistan, whose concrete evidence had been put together by our police officers of them having conducted, triggered those blasts. Even those were turned to make them look like Hindu terror. So, sorry, one thing after another. When if you just try to put away the information from your sources for a second and look at the entire chain of events in entirety, you would realize it was just too fantastic. It just didn't add up, so that was when I thought, one, we need to really look at this much more closely. But then, Lieutenant Colonel Purohit was in jail. A lot of other people were in jail. And there was a kind of an atmosphere where even people who didn't believe in anything were not ready to talk about it. And then there were those who knew a lot about it. They were even more reticent to talk about it. I guess we can understand why it was so. So till he was in jail, there was no question of moving further on the thing, because I had no opportunity. Even after getting bail, it took me a while to organize things in such a way that we can come to know. And then I have put it out very clearly in black and white in the very first chapter of the book, right after the preface. I'm sure you've read it. That I tried to manage. Meet, I tried to go and meet up with the person, the protagonist of the book, and yes, he met me. It was brief, but it was quite fruitful, I would say. However, it was in the course of our conversations that I brought up the issue of writing about it, because in the course of in the meantime, more than 10 years had elapsed, and I was realizing that most of the people I spoke to was sort of, it was going out of their memories, all this case of this entire case. So I realized, on the one side of the picture, everything is there in the public domain, everything is on record, so much has been written about it. But if you look at the other side of the picture, there is nothing much on record. Today, if you want to search on Google, or you want to find out in a library what exactly happened, you will find that there's hardly anything there, because people just couldn't put it together. So when I broached the subject, uh, Colonel Purohit, about writing on this, Colonel Purohit initially wasn't agreeable. Subsequently, he agreed, in the sense he allowed me to go on with the writing, because he said, as a journalist, you have the right to put things in your own way. However, since there is a trial going on and I am involved in it, therefore, please do not expect even a word of input about the case or about all that happened from my side. I said, that is crazy. If you are not going to provide me anything, how am I cannot write on hearsay. So that was when he said, that is up to you. You are a news reporter. If you can source the information, good luck to you. From my side, there will be no such communication. So, initially I was slightly, I should say, irritated, but then I understood his position and I let it be. I took some time for myself, thought over the whole thing, and I started gathering all the information in the public domain. And I realized that even if I do not get anything very special, all that is available in the public domain. If we just put it together in perspective, relating the chain of events, it will be clear before the country what exactly happened. So, yes, in a few lines, that's how it happened.
Indeed, ma'am, that's an interesting story, and you know, it's a heartening story more than anything else, and that's something.
But
Uh,
do allow me one sentence. This is what I shared with you just now is how it started. But it didn't just get done that moment. It took me a long, long while to
Obviously.
put it all together. It's been from it's we are like we I think we've just finished the fourth year since that first
Wow.
day I decided to write, which
Yeah,
includes the editing time and etc.
of course, the whole research for this entire thing wouldn't be easy because at the end of it, it's not something that you can just Google up. There's so many multiple facets and angles. There's so many multiple people which are involved, and you mentioned quite a bit of them. So they each one of them has a different facet, a different story, a different angle, and a different game altogether, if I may. But ma'am, in the book, the second and the third chapter, you've kind of covered a certain narrative, and to me, that is the most interesting thing, and that's the most important thing to talk about. Because today's world, one thing that we've seen is more powerful than all the bombs in the world is the narrative. And we've seen attacks on our own country. We saw what happened last year with the string of protests that happened. It was all narrative driven. I want you to analyze the narrative that went across here, and we'll talk about the impact, but just the narrative to begin with, ma'am.
Yeah, so let me tell you, actually, you see, in a way, when you look back at all of it, it looks and sounds very complex. But then, from another perspective, it's actually quite simple. Okay, it's really not that complex. You see, India has been the target because of our demography, because of our social equations, because of our particular political standing in the world, and for various reasons, both internal and external. India is this one country which has been the target of jihadi terrorism for decades now. It's like there is a set of people out there in the world who want to show India as a trophy by completely demolishing our peace, our harmony, finishing us off as a country that stands tall as a democracy, despite all the contradictions in our social and cultural milieu. So we have been that target forever. It makes life difficult and dangerous for our citizens of all communities. It also puts a kind of pressure and insecurity on a particular community. So all
Hmm.
that background is there. Now there was this certain period, uh, Adi,
Yes, ma'am.
at which time we were constantly under attack.
Hmm.
Before that, we used to associate terror with a certain regions in the country.
Yeah.
Kashmir Valley was one of them. But this was a period when there was no such boundaries. There was series of attacks from one city to another. Every corner of the country had been attacked, finally, which went on to culminate in the Mumbai, the 26/11 attack, which till date I think is the worst terror attack on our soil.
Yeah.
But I'm talking of the period preceding that, the Mumbai attacks. There were other attacks in Mumbai before that, by the way, and I'm sure there were blasts and series of blasts, etc. Now, there there were people who were able to connect the dots. They had penetrated very, very deep inside these organizations which were behind these attacks, and they had gone so far as to make it inconvenient for some people, is my reading. So it was perhaps necessary to create an example to silence them. And certainly, The handlers were abroad, outside India's territory, but there were, and there must have been people who were serving as conduits in India. At the same time, links had been established between the left wing terror in some states of our country through Nepal, and Pakistan was always there, micromanaging the whole show. Now, uh, it sounds quite fantastic and
Mm.
impossible now, but it is a fact that one if one created a smoke screen, a story that look, there is also something called Hindu extremism, Hindu terror. There is some, so it was very convenient to create a false equivalence, so that the majority community came under cloud. There was questioning, and that will automatically, when you say that, oh, there is the terror on the other side, there is violent extremism, there are bomb blasts, then it automatically makes the other side look not so bad. So by creating a false equivalence, you are making India into that country which is racked by, both kinds of, like a conflict situation. And that situation is very useful and beneficial to the people who want to make us look bad, because it makes their job easier. Okay, and in this way create disharmony in the society, foment trouble between communities. So Hindu terror could have become, and did become, for a certain period of time, a very very convenient tool to give a safe passage to other terrorists in the country, number one. And number two, it created a false equivalence which could be exploited, which could be projected worldwide, to make this country look like, communities, extreme forces fighting each other. So I think Hindu terror was a ploy. I think it was a conspiracy to defame the majority community, and some people who had become inconvenient because of the work that they had done or they were doing. It was found like killing two birds with one stone, to throw them into, throw them under the bus and make it look like a great story. Unfortunately, some very important people got pulled into it.
Mm.
And I do believe, and I have written, and people before me who know it from inside much better than me, have already written that there was a political
Back.
support to the idea.
And that is, I think, one of the most dangerous things that is around, because at the end of it, normally I don't really get into politics in this channel, but when politics will interfere into national security, that is where the line, the proverbial line, is crossed. I don't mind people standing on political dharnas and kind of giving dialogues and speeches, and which probably a little off center or whatever you may want to call it. But when this kind of stuff happens where people's lives are at stake, it's a bit of a challenge. And that's what brings me to my next question: is the impact of this narrative, man? Of course, this lasted for a certain number of years. It was not just a singular impact. It was this, it was the Masjid Blast, it was some Jhota Express, and I'm quite convinced even the Mumbai was supposed to be kind of fitted in that particular way. I can't prove it, but a lot of people do say that. Leaving all that apart, ma'am, what is the impact of such a narrative?
We have to look at it from, first of all, I don't think too many people in the country bought the theory eventually. But yes, for a certain period of time, it did trigger a huge debate.
Hmm.
And, the whole the whole thing came out. It used to come out like a daily soap, you know. Every day there was some more information being thrown into the media. So it went on and on. And after all, people do consume news, look at presuming it is true,
True.
right?
Mm.
So it did create a debate. It did give a chance to a certain segment of people to throw this Hindu terror jibe at the majority community. But we have also to look at it from the standpoint, that is, had this really taken off in a big way, which thankfully it didn't. Had the Hindu terror theory really taken off in a big way, who would it have benefited eventually? The enemies
Mm.
of our country?
Absolutely.
Because they already did. I mean, the joke of all jokes is Hafiz Saeed made a very caustic comment on India by using the Hindu terror term. And I've mentioned it in my book, you must have read it already. When there was some question to him about something on terror, he answered by saying there is Hindu terror in India. So when people like Hafiz Saeed start getting an excuse, a handle to point at us, you can understand who this was going to benefit eventually. Unfortunately, people inside the country, there were some who became doubtful because of the stories that appeared, and there were others who thought it was a good way to play their politics, and hence uh, it was they forgot that this would eventually benefit the enemies of the nation, and they also helped in carrying forward the narrative. I'm talking of people within India.
Ma'am, a question is always asked when you create a narrative. It's called qui bono. Who kind of is beneficial to this? You hinted towards Pakistan, and that is, I mean, if I may, it's a no-brainer. Pakistan is looking for any fault line within the country to kind of get into and create a disbalance in that entire area. Who else benefited from this entire narrative of Hindu terror?
No, I think it is primarily Pakistan, but there are powers also apart from Pakistan who would not like a stable, a peaceful, a harmonious India. And there are people looking for
Hmm.
petty political games, who play along, pouncing at everything that comes their way just for small political benefits, forgetting what the larger damage they are causing.
That is interesting because, ma'am, at the end of it, you in your book, you've kind of taken up a particular organization which morphed itself in multiple facets. They were, uh, it didn't morph itself, but I think there were multiple morphs of that particular name, that one particular organization that we've spoken about. Uh, and one realizes that because of the murkiness of the entire game, the truth never came out. So it seems to have been designed in a certain way to ensure that, the reality does not come out because it is hidden behind so many curtains of lies. What
You
that
see?
tells,
Yeah, yes.
ma'am, what that tells me
Look,
is this is not a knee-jerk reaction.
no, look, Simi, for a long time, Simi was looked upon as this band of young boys, who were kind of forming of social organizations. Sometimes boys make mistakes, etc. It wasn't. Simi was a very, very deep rooted, dreaded organization working to terrorize, to destroy our country, directly connected to people sitting across the border with conduits in Nepal, and having an understanding with the Red Wing terror people for their arms and their training and etc. It was a murky relationship rooted in terror and devastation. And oh, that period of time was such a difficult time for the country. I know the real truth didn't come out, but It came out the harsher way.
Yeah.
It came out the harsher way when Simi eventually had to be banned. And then, let me tell you, the story is not over. You have seen the activities of the PFI all over the country. Today, they may be banned, but their people are active all around. I have seen their activities in Delhi myself. All that we witnessed in the past 2 years are things which had been found out and written about at that time itself. Unfortunately, they were tackled not in the way that they should have been, but in the completely opposite way.
Absolutely
All
agree.
these reports were lying there, all these connections, all these reports, all these plans of destroying India were lying there. And so you know it it came out by and by.
I don't want to give the secret away, but when I read this book, there are certain characters and certain names, sorry, that keep popping up. You know, and these particular characters today find themselves in not a very pleasant place, if I may. Some of them have left this world. God give them peace, but some of them are still suffering for their karma. What does that tell you, ma'am? The similarity of the characters that we found in those cases back then, and the similarity of certain characters which were related to certain incidents that happened, for example, in Maharashtra. How does that?
Yes, I can tell you two things. We can never wish away politics. Politics is good till it stays in the political arena. Politics must not go so far as to jeopardize the peace and security of the country. Secondly, officers must have that strength of character to stand up to it when they are made tools or pawns in a conspiracy. And thirdly, as incidents have shown in the past few years, I have no doubt that there was every plan in a very, very planned manner to label the 26/11 Mumbai blasts also as a work of so-called Hindu terrorists. It had been, thank God for Tukaram Omble. He had the courage to catch one terrorist alive. He paid with his life for that, but he saved the whole country. We should be forever grateful to
Absolutely.
him for his service to his motherland, and also the fact that is exposed a lot of people. It foiled their design. Even then, the people didn't give up. You see, that shows how invested they were in the whole conspiracy. Even after Kasab was caught, he was languishing in jail. Till then, he had not been punished. The trial was on. Even after all that happened in Mumbai, all the truth had come out. People had the audacity to write books showing the Mumbai attack as something that was engineered by RSS people. Can you imagine? So, yes, if they dared to do it even after Kasab was caught, you can imagine if all of them had been, nobody had been caught alive. I think the script was all there.
Mm.
It was all scripted. And then, if you relate it to Malegaon and Samjhauta and Mumbai and everything, you will realize that an entire chain of events would have been shown as Hindu terror, as if India was steeped in something called Hindu terror. And you can imagine the global impact of that narrative. It still worked. But if it had worked in the case of Mumbai, you can imagine how very serious, what a serious proportion it would have taken. They still did it.
That's the problem, because the narrative keepers are normally the guys who control the narrative in the large aspect of it, especially the wrong narrative. So that is one thing which I take. Ma'am, just to close this wonderful discussion, I want to actually ask you a personal uh, question with regards to your interaction with him and his family. Uh,
Hmm.
how do you look at them? When you look at them in their eyes, what do you see? Do you see anguish? Do you see
I have
anger?
different impressions. Yes. I have different impressions of all of them. Colonel Purohit has become quite, I don't know if it is in his nature, God made him like that, or whether all that he has gone through 9 years of incarceration and this entire unending legal battle that is still on. Uh, Maybe it is in his nature, or maybe this experience has made him like that. Lieutenant Colonel Prasad Purohit is today a very stoic kind of a human being, almost yogic. It's
My God.
something like, he's reached a level nothing affects him anymore. Or maybe he has maintained that expression. He's that, his self control is such. So from him, I challenge you to get any emotion out of on his face. You cannot. So that's a different level totally. He's fighting his case, and he's serving his duty. Fighting his case is all I know. I don't know too many details, but that's my impression of him. He is one of the most intelligent persons I have met. Apart from being very, very meditative, very stoic and in control, he is also one of the most intelligent, brilliant men I have known. With a very, very extremely self-disciplined life, and and his love for the army is almost, it amounts to worship. After all that has he has gone through, it sounds impossible, but this is what I gathered in my interaction. His love for the Indian army almost like worship. Even after all that has happened, he will not speak a word and not allow you to speak a word about the army. Such is his dedication.
That's the family
Is
value.
one thing. And Aparna Purohit, I have written it in as many words, and I will say it here. If ever there was a woman of steel on earth, it is Dr. Aparna Purohit. She, in a way, has fought the battle for justice, for what they went through. The initial few months were very difficult for her, because for a long time she kept thinking this was just a misunderstanding and it
Mm.
will be cleared. Then she realized no, it was much more serious than that. That was when she decided to take up the battle, putting together the legal team and almost working with them. And yes, I can say that it's very difficult to put it in one or two lines. Uh, it's a very detailed thing to discuss about. I will only say that she is the living example of a woman of steel who is ready to face everything that comes and yet not give up her positivity. She fought all the legal issues. She took care of the boys, because you must realize that in these 9 years of incarceration, both Colonel Purohit's sons actually grew up in his absence.
And for no rhyme or reason. I'd go out on a limb and add that. There's no rhyme or reason for whatever has happened. It's a sad story. It's a sad state of affairs of a time in our country where we could not trust anyone. I think that's one gist that one gets out. We nearly missed a disaster waiting for it to happen, and I think Colonel Purohit is paying the price of that shift.
Yes, I will
And
agree with you. And this was something in his election campaigns in 2013 and the early months of 2014. Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji also used to, repeat in his rallies many times. The worst, you know what was, these cases will come and go. All
yeah,
right, India is a big country. We are strong enough to weather all kinds of conspiracies. But let me tell you that in this country, the worst part about the UPA 1 and 2, especially UPA 2 period, was it just sort of killed trust in people. You didn't know whom to trust. It was a loss of trust, a period of loss of trust. Vishwas khatm ho chuka tha. There was no trust left in anything. Such was the atmosphere created. I really shudder when I think back to that period, because we are not talking of something a century ago. Okay,
Oh,
it just
just,
just happened here.
and it can happen again if we are not careful. It can happen again and again and again and again if we are not careful. And that's, I think, one of the messages I'd like to take away from this wonderful book of yours, ma'am, and the talk that we are having. Guys, whoever's going to watch this show, this is something I'd really recommend buying. You can actually go through this in a day. If you guys have just a day off, nothing else to do, go through this in a day. It took me lesser time than that because it's easy reading, and plus the main thing that I found is that you need to kind of put your mind in a very open place to grab hold of all this information, because there's a lot that ma'am has mentioned in this entire game where she's actually taken us through detailed incidents. Now I'm not going to sit here and give away the book because that really is away from the point, but I really want to request everybody watching the show, please do buy it, please do read it, because it will give you an angle that probably you would not have heard of before. I'm sure all of us have heard of Lt Col Purohit. There are a lot of people talking about him. There are a lot of people who've written about him a little bit here and there and stuff like that. But a concise story, a holistic picture, and from someone who probably has looked into his eyes is something that an interesting perspective that I'd like to know about. The Indian Army has always been there to protect our nation, and I think here is an Indian Army soldier who stood by and gone through whatever was thrown at him, and he's still standing strong. Ma'am, from from the audience of Deaf Talks, my side, I'd like to please request you to give him a salute and tell him all the best. And it'll be wonderful that he finishes his case really fast, and if he could himself pen down his story for all of us to read and learn from. But in the interim, ma'am, what you've done is a public service, and I'd like to congratulate you for it. Thank you so
I
much.
don't know. I really don't know. You are very kind, Adi. I really don't know what service it is. I can only say that it was just too much for me to to bear. I wanted to put it in black and white somewhere, and so I just did it. I didn't think of the consequences. I still have people calling me, messaging me every day. Some of them are my closest well wishers, others are complete strangers, all asking me, why did you get into this? How did you dare? And what made you think of it? I told you, it was just not adding up, and I wanted to get to the bottom of it, and that's it. And I thought, once I came to know, I thought the others also must know about it, because in another 2 or 3 years people are going to forget about it completely, and there will be nothing on record left for our generations to know what happened in that period of time. And it directly concerns the politics as well as the security of the nation. But yes, we have talked of the narrative, we have talked of the subject, but to know how it was executed, how that script was executed, please read the book. Adi has already recommended it. I can only request, read the book. It's a very brief read. It's a one day read or a one flight read or a overnight train journey read. Try to know what happened, and we will be happy to have feedback from all kinds of people, and all sort of feedback is welcome.
On the last note, ma'am, just the sheer factor that you are writing this book and we are talking about it tells us how far we've come from the dark days that we refer to in our conversation. Looking forward for
Yes.
many more interactions with you, ma'am, learning and trying to figure out what's happening around us. Till then, Jai Hind.
Thank you. Jai Hind.